And good morning. Welcome to your Tuesday morning cup of cyber. We are kicking a warm day off today with National Dolphin Day. Today in Cup of Cyber, we'll be talking about buffer overflows as part of the Security Plus examination. So join us right after the brief intro and we'll dig into that one. All right, and we are off for another good morning. So what we're going to talk about today is the buffer overflows. And buffer overflows is a type of attack you're going to have to know for the first domain threats, attacks, and vulnerabilities. In this attack, first let's look into this thing. Let's dive right into it and define it. So NIST defines this thing as a method of overloading a predefined amount of memory storage in a buffer, which can potentially overwrite and corrupt memory beyond the buffer's boundaries. And we're going to look at this a little bit. And really what it is, when a programmer develops a program, when they write the code, they should bound each piece of data. So if we have something like a name, we know a name is usually a certain amount of space, right? So we can determine it should be no bigger than, say, 20 characters. That might be the first name. And if we don't bound the data, then we have the possibility of one of these buffer overflows. So an attacker can try to send more data to that buffer through the input and try to overflow into another part of the program's memory. So when they do this, it can cause the system to crash, and it takes a lot of trial and error to figure out exactly where these spots of overflow are and and how they can be exploited. So in this illustration, we have Alice, who is using a program, and the program is asking her to enter her name. So please enter your name. So Alice puts her name in, ALICE, and we see in that name buffer space, there's plenty name for her name, plenty of space for her name, plus a little bit extra, right? So we can have a bigger name if we want to. So when the programmer allocates the space, it should be big enough for normal names, and maybe it should let people know when there's too much. Now we also see that's the blue buffer space. That's the name buffer space. We also see within the program there's another space for an amount buffer. And in that amount buffer, there's already an amount there, which is 10. Maybe that's $10 or 10 units or 10 each. We don't know what that 10 is all about, but that's part of the program that's already got a variable. It's already got data stored in that buffer that's the amount of 10. So Alice, being Alice, a normal user, is going to put her name in, and it fills that space, and it doesn't overflow it. There's space left over. Let's say this program was developed poorly and that space isn't bound, that namespace isn't bound, and an attacker, say Hank the hacker, realizes that name buffer space is not bounded and it can be overflown. It can cause an overflow error. So through trial and error, they'll figure out exactly how big that buffer is, and they'll fill the buffer up with whatever random data will fill it. So in this case, Hank has just used the capital letter S. So he put enough capital letter S's in there until it fills up that entire name buffer space. Now, the 9s that he's put in there have to go somewhere because we haven't bound that buffer space. So when he puts in the 9s, now they overflow that amount buffer space. So if that amount buffer space was maybe for something like a refund, and it was supposed to be a $10 refund or a $10 discount that was already set in the program or was set by some other action within the program, maybe based on their username. So Hank now fills up the namespace, and they've determined that the next buffer space that they can overflow into is this amount space. So Hank fills it up with S's and then adds 9s to fill up the buffer space of the amount with 9s, and now they've changed it from 10, which it was before, to 9. So now it's 9,999 instead of 10. So maybe that was a discount or a refund or whatever it was. or maybe it was the ability, in some cases, to create a administrator account on the system. So what we're saying is the buffer overflow is overflowing a buffer space, and the buffer space is just that amount of space put into the program by the programmer to hold a variable or a value. And the attacker has exploited that by overflowing it into the next space that shouldn't happen. So it's also called a stack overflow. So these are concepts you should know for the Security Plus. This is a straightforward one as we define it, but it's really difficult to manage as an attacker. Normally an advanced concept, and it's one of the things when we develop code and we write code we should be aware of and look out for. So as always, I'm Jim with your Morning Cup of Cyber. Hope you're having a good day out there. Be safe, like, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified when the new stuff's coming out. It's going to come out quick here in the future. And hit some comments below. We're thinking about having some study sessions. It's maybe a weekly study session set up on a secure version of Zoom, but bring people together and maybe talk about the concepts of that week. So let me know in the comments below what you think of that. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, be safe out there.